Hi, welcome to Brave Bait. Today I'm going to talk about tackle and I'm going to talk about all the bait that you can catch, different species, different families, and a lot of fish behavior. So it's not just tackle I'm going to talk about, but just pay attention. And whenever I say something that I want to really stress, I'll ring these bells, uh, help you remember better. Okay, let's do this. So, my number one go-to when I catch bait is hand lining. This is the only equipment required. A small hook, a monofilament leader, and braided line. And the length that I use is about a foot of leader and more than the stretch of my arms. And at the end, I just tie a loop and I put it around my right arm because I'm right-handed, like this, and start casting really small baits like wax worms, mealworms, bits and pieces of night crawlers. Um, Basically, it all has to do with what the fish eat, and you can substitute things like instead of using night crawlers, you can use chicken meat. You can use hot dogs. You can use corn. But it all boils down to what the fish are eating. So these fish, sunfish, they love things that look like worms, larvae, insects. Um, they love crawfish, lots of larvae, butterflies, small fish. I'm going to show you these grubs that also work for the same kind of fish. They love, shad. They love minnows. These things look like alien things, but the fish strike them, believe me. And, these tiny baits, very simple baits, they're very effective. Put them on a jig, and you got yourself some panfish. And these are really cheap baits that honestly I just bought at Walmart, and it was a crappie fishing kit. One of the best investments, like $5, and you get this whole kit. Uh, so I use a lot of jigs to catch the panfish, um, and I use different size jigs. Um, the more colorful, the better. You can see this one's been used quite a bit. And I catch a lot of different size fish. And I'm going to talk about size of hooks and importance of it. Now, the size of the fish that's eating your bait can vary greatly. You can catch a huge bass on a tiny bait and a tiny hook. Doesn't matter. And you can catch the tiniest bluegill on the same hook. But there comes a limit. You have to understand the size of the mouth that's swallowing the bait. If the mouth is not big enough for that hook to fit, that's not happening. This fish is not getting hooked, not easily. But if the hook falls right in, we're hooked. Oh, let's go. See? Um, Also, presentation. You have to understand what's the weight of this in water. When I throw this in and I have a small bait, guess what? It sinks as naturally as it ever can. And the fish cannot tell the difference between it naturally falling and it being on this hook. Also, when you have a jig and a lure, the presentation stays just like this, up and down. But that's exactly how the fish behave. That's how they swim. They swim in this behavior where they stand like this, stay like this, and go up and down, and side to side. That's how they present themselves. That's the natural way. And whenever you mimic that natural behavior or unnatural behavior, that's when you twitch your bait. See, naturally bait will fall and swim, but unhealthy bait is going to do this. It's going to go twitch, twitch, sit around, sit around, sit around, twitch, twitch, and do stupid, crazy things. And that just aggravates pike and bass and bluegill and catfish and any other fish, because what they see is injured fish that's struggling. Bait with the right twitching and sinking and, in their face presentation, they're gonna eat it and they're gonna get on the hook and they're yours. Now, the leader and its importance, obviously, the less the fish see, the less they're suspicious, the more they're aggressive. And the braided line has no give, which is very brutal on the fish. So the leader does. See how it's stretchy? I'm able to stretch my arms like this, and that's the leader's give. You gotta have a little give. And now transferring over to my fishing poles. The fishing pole provides a lot of the give for when you have a fish on it. This is the fishing pole I use to catch panfish and smaller bass. I say smaller bass because I don't think a large bass would be a great idea to catch on such light gear. So this is a Shakespeare Micro Series. Let me show this to you better. Here we go. Shakespeare Micro Series. It's a light action rod, and it's 7 feet long, and it basically behaves like a little whip. I can whip a tiny bait like this 1/32 ounce jig, and I can whip something as heavy as up to an ounce. The recommended weights and line strength, just use the gear as recommended. It's recommended for good reason, so you don't break your shit. Pardon my French. And there's also a lot to be said about the reel. The reel has to match the fishing rod and has to match the action that you're driving for. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to have fast retrieve, slow retrieve? Are you having a lot of drag or going really finesse? I invest most of my money into the reels. On this rod, I use a Daiwa Revros 2500, and this reel packs a lot of punch. It has a lot of drag, over 20 pounds, but I use it to do very finesse fishing using only 6 pounds braided line as my main line and 6 pound monofilament as my leader line. And I love it because the smallest fish will give you a great thrill on this kind of rod. And I use it when I'm fishing for larger bait fish, or just jigging. Its sensitivity is unbelievable, and it's made out of carbon. It's a really great rod. Shakespeare really stepped it up on this one. Okay, moving on. Once I catch the bait, clearly, I don't spend all my time just catching bait. Um, I put it on more serious, beefy rods like this one. Um, this is my go-to for all the predator fish that are big, mean, and do not give up. Um, I use this rod in rivers, lakes, anywhere I go. And I use some serious tackle. This rod is a medium heavy, 7 foot long Shimano rod. It's 2-piece. All of my rods are 2-piece. Um, and it's a glass rod. It's made out of glass fiber. Medium heavy action, fast. And I'm sorry, the power is medium heavy. Action is fast. What does that mean? It means this rod is really beefy, as in has a lot of backbone. And fast action means that this tip will bend a whole lot before the rest of the rod will bend. Weight sensitivity combined with beef stick action. So the biggest fish can put all the heat on your rod and it won't break. I mean, you can put a lot of heat on the fish too. Just take a look at this sinker that I'm using. See how beat up it is? It's bent. It's like missing a corner or something. Um, that's what happens when you fish in a river with a lot of rocks. And what I do is I use 40-pound braid as my main line and 25 or 30-pound mono as my leader. And I use a long leader. I use about 3-foot leader altogether, and about a foot leader that leads to the hook. All that has to be monofilament, otherwise you're gonna lose it. Believe me. You have to use monofilament or fluorocarbon for your leaders. If you're gonna fish braid, do it the right way. Don't fish direct braid. Braid going direct to your bait or hook, directed to your hook, no good. A bass will chew right through it. A catfish will gnaw it off. A pike will completely leave you looking like a fool. So yeah, that being said, let's take a look at the rest of the setup. I use a Carolina rig, as you can see, with these sliders. I found them to be most durable and least easily lost. Yes, they cost a little bit of extra money, but it's worthwhile investment, I think. And then I use a swivel here, and a 30-pound line that leads to an 8-aught hook. The hook is an octopus circle hook. It's a generic hook made in China, and it works really great. When I say cheap, I mean under a quarter. That's what it cost for me to buy this hook. And over here, where the braided line meets my mono is a double uni knot. It's the best knot for this kind of tie up, never fails. Um, and if it does, each time the monofilament fails first. It's set up that way on purpose, so I'm not losing extra line. It's a little bit of overkill, but it makes you can handle your fish with confidence with this kind of setup, small or big. But you know, you use a fishing net, a landing net. Don't be like me. Don't just use your hands most of the time. Uh, you'll pay for it with your own blood. Okay, and also the reel. Um, this is a bait runner reel. What does that mean? That means that there's two brake systems, one in the back, one in the front. This is the main drag. This is the bait drag. When I switch over to the bait drag, okay, this requires very little pull. And I can adjust it so that it requires almost just a teensy bit of pull. Now when I switch over, then I have to pull rather hard. But that's because I cranked up the brake. But that's the difference. The main drag, you gotta pull hard. The bait drag, it's for the running. And when you hear it, you know that the fish is messing with your bait. And sometimes you'll just hear the the bait runner going, and that just, if that doesn't get you excited, I don't know what will. So yeah, and you'll see me using my various tackle in my videos. And hopefully you won't witness all the swearing that I do. But believe me, the day you learn how to cast is the day you learn how to swear. Another reason why I use poles that are 7 feet long, that's because of my height. Um, I'm comfortable handling a rod that's 7 foot long. Uh, but if I was a much shorter person, I would imagine myself with different gear. Um, but that's just me. If you're comfortable handling a 12, 15, 18 feet rod wherever you fish, great. But, for me, gear has to be applicable to a lot of situations. I can't, go through the bushes and have a lot of trees behind me and swing a 9 foot pole like nothing's behind me. That's not gonna work. Um, also the gear has to fit into my car. Realistically, I don't drive a truck, um, and I don't have that kind of space where I would just set them as this. So my gear has two pieces. Breaks apart into halves, um, and that's fine. Now moving on to my third rod that I use also for catfish, bass, and pike. What's different? The difference between this rod and this rod that I use for bigger fish is that the reel has a faster retrieve, just like the first one, and it's also a bait caster. Big difference. But I have the same type of setup with braided line as my main line and monofilament as my leader with the Carolina rig with a 2-ounce sinker. Um, and this rod is kind of like a whip because of the way the handle is and the reel. It's really light, and so it matches the gear. Um, y- th- but don't let the small reel confuse you. This reel is heavy duty, 18 pounds of uh, drag. This is a Star Drag reel, Abu Garcia Black Max 2, I believe. Um, or just Black Max, I don't know, whatever. It has a high gear ratio. I think it's like 6.4 to 1. And what that means is with each turn, um, I get a lot of line, so I can do fast retrieve, which allows me to fish uh, things like the Whopper Plopper and also do bumping, um, which I also enjoy doing on this rod in the rivers. And I'll explain bumping in a second. Okay, so back to my baitcaster. It's my favorite way of fishing. Um, anyways, the rod itself. Um, it's a big game rod from Berkeley. It's a medium heavy rod. You can cast 1 to 4 ounces on it, and I use 30-pound braided line on it, um, and 30-pound monofilament. Whenever I need to break the line off, um, 90% of the time, monofilament is the first one to go, which tells you a little bit about how braided line works. Oh God. Everything's fine. We're having technical difficulties. Should never have let this go. Okay. So, anyways, really beefy. That's what it is. A lot of backbone, which means I can um, really wrangle in the fish. Um, yes, this rod is sensitive and has, I believe, kind of slow action. Not very fast. Um, but this casting rod, you can handle the biggest fish of your life on it, and it won't break. The best thing about these rods is that they're all cheap and they're very durable. But they are all fragile. They're made out of glass. They're made out of carbon fiber. They're made out of glass fiber. So yes, just like glass breaks, that's how rods break too. Most of the time, you do the damage at home or on your way somewhere, and then your rod breaks, and you go, "What happened?" And sometimes a fish will break it. Yes, they do that. That has happened to me before. Most of the time, it's a result of me high sticking them. High sticking is when the angle of the rod is completely wrong and too much pressure goes on the tip of the rod. Um, Once you learn from a mistake, you don't repeat it that often. Now let's talk about species of fish and how they behave. The fish I catch, all of them are predators. I'm gonna use this trout as just a general example of any fish I'm talking about. So right now I'm talking about um, minnows. Minnows, are very important fish. Why? Because by number, if you picked any fish in the world randomly, 1 out of 4 would be a minnow from the minnow family. That's huge. A quarter of the world's fish are in the minnow family. A quarter of those fish, of all fish, are in the minnow family. That means that every predator fish that's out there in fresh water, they see more minnows than any other fish they encounter, including themselves. There are fewer predators than the bait fish themselves. So that's the most common bait fish you can think of and use, and they're great for all predators. Secondly, now we're talking about bluegills. What do they eat? They eat small insects, other small fish like minnows, and crawfish, and other small invertebrates and tiny animals, tiny larvae, um, other kind of fish, other sunfish also get eaten by bluegill and bass. So in that family, their primary diet consists of something that's alive, something that dropped in the water, like the larvae, or is growing on the bottom somewhere, like mosquito larvae, or crawfish. These are the staple foods of these fish, and that's why they're so easy to jig for with things that imitate these critters that they eat. Now, bluegill themselves, they're gonna get eaten by catfish, bass, um, pike, trout, all kinds of other game fish. And that's what I'm after. I'm mostly after catfish, pike, and bass because they're the most daring and strongest predator fish in freshwater. They fight the best, and they're easiest to catch. Actually, um, you just gotta know how they behave, and that's what I really want to talk about. Um, how these fish feed. Um, the sunfish, they feed primarily uh, when the sun comes up and before the sundown. And that's when I go and catch them. And I can catch them during the day too, but they're going to be more opportunistic than hungry. Um, Catfish, they come out at night. They're the night patrol. Yes, they're active early in the morning, an hour after sunrise, but their activity is primarily an hour after sunset up until sunrise. The night is their best friend for whatever reasons. Whether they can see at night very well, or it doesn't matter. You know why? Because their entire body is covered with sensors uh, for taste. They can taste with their entire body. It's amazing. Even their fins are covered with them. So these fish are equivalent of the bloodhound on our in our understanding of animals, um, and that's why they're so easy to catch. Throw in anything that smells good, and they're right after it. And eliciting a strike, as I mentioned before, that's the important thing in catching these big fish. Bumping. What bumping does is this. Let's say I put a crawfish or a fake crawfish on the hook and I cast it out on a Carolina rig like this on that hook and I let it sit on the bottom. Um, and the current is going this way. And then I pick it up and drop it down. Wait, wait, wait. Pick it up a little, drop it down again. Wait, wait, wait. And while I'm doing it, I'm keeping the line taut. I'm not letting it get slack. So pick it up, drop it down, handle the slack. Pick it up, drop it down, wait, pull up the slack. And as I do this bumping, jumping, whatever you want to call it, and there doesn't need to be any current. We can do this in the lake, anywhere. Just as so far as you're doing it against the current. The motion of your bait is against the current. Or you can do it with current if you're in a boat. But I do it against the current because I'm on shore or off a bridge. And it works both ways. I don't care what they say. And as the bait goes up and down like this, the fish becomes aggravated with it and wants to eat it. The fish have no other way of being aggressive than eating something, so they just angry at you, and they're on the hook. That's how I caught that pike that I put on the cover of bait by bumping mackerel. Now, why mackerel? Mackerel doesn't even live in fresh water. Mackerel is in the same family as herring and skipjack herring. Skipjack herring is king of bait, but I have no idea how to catch it. At least not where I live. I don't think they roam in the rivers where I live. I never caught one here. So I get the next best thing, cousin of herring, and that's what I find in the grocery store, which is mackerel. And that mackerel is just as oily, is stinky and fishy as skipjack. And I go bumping in the river and I catch a pike. And I caught numerous catfish on mackerel. It's one of the best baits ever. And I routinely use bluegill and minnows, especially shad. Not shad. Shiners. There we go. Shiners. You know why shiners? Because shiners attack bass nests for eggs. Let me repeat that. Shiners attack bass nests for eggs. So bass hate shiners. They want to eat them on the spot. They see a shiner, they want to eat it. Yeah. You want to catch more bass? You want to catch more catfish? Use shiners. Next episode, live bait, how to do it, where to do it, when to do it, and why to do it. Fish on.